Hi, this is Tessa, and last week we talked about gathering information from the SSDI, which is the Social Security Death Index. And at that time, I mentioned that this was a record set that I wanted to collect because I wasn't sure how much longer the SSDI was going to be available online for genealogy and certainly one name researchers. It's important to gather data from a variety of sources, whether you're doing genealogy in general or you're doing certainly your one name study. And this is basically speaking to a one name study at this point. You want to collect information about your community, about your state, about your country, and I'm speaking mostly to the Americans who are doing one name studies. But at some point, you want to go global with your one name study. And the reason that you want to do this is you want to be able to answer inquiries from other people who share your surname when they ask you about records that might be in England or Ireland, Canada or Australia, or basically anywhere. And so something I think everyone wants to do or everyone should do when they're doing a one name study is gather all of that information that's freely available online so that you have various data sets and realize that this is going to be one of those long continuing processes and that just gathering the data set isn't the end of your research, but a lot of times gathering these data sets really helps you with your research. It gives you a feel for how many people with your surname are in various countries. It gives you the ability to maybe connect birth information with census information. Certainly in the instance of free birth, marriage, and death information, it gives you the ability to combine those three vital statistics with census information, which really opens a lot of doors for you in your research, certainly if you're trying to connect families. So today what I wanted to talk about was how do you gather that information on the free birth, marriage, and death index and put it into something that's useful for you. Now, I use Excel, Microsoft Excel, for my spreadsheets. It's just something I've become familiar with. I like how it's laid out. It's my personal preference. You might use a comma separated value sheet. You might use Google spreadsheets. You might use an open office system. I think that they're generally similar. I think that some programs might have more bells and whistles at this point, but I'm sure the other programs are going to get there at a certain point. I'm going to show you how I do it in Excel, and please take it and use it however it is your program does. And if it's a different way, I would love to see your video in this regard. In any event, what you can see right now is that I have free birth, marriage, and death homepage open on a website, and I also have my Excel workbook open. I'm going to talk a little bit about the workbook in a minute, but know that you should have opened it and you should have put it together. But let's talk a little bit first about what free birth, marriage, death index is. Basically, civil registration occurred starting in 1837 in England and Wales, and free birth, marriage, death index is simply a listing of the index for the time period from 1837 to 1983. This information is freely available. Keep in mind it's an index. It's not the actual registration. And this is helpful because it gives you that first piece of information, the index pages. But when you take this research further, you probably want to see the actual registration, you want to see the actual marriage certificate, you want to see the actual death registration. Because a lot of times, and many of you will already know this, the index tells you where to find it in the volume and page. The registration itself might give you something like the father's name, the mother's maiden name, maybe specifically where they lived in that district. All of that information is helpful when we're talking about the birth records. That same type of information, parents' names, witnesses' names, is useful in marriage information, and you can extrapolate that for the death information. So this is talking about birth records in England and Wales in the time frame 1837 to 1983. And the first thing you should know is that Find My Past, which is another website, and it's a subscription website, carries this information forward from 1983 until, I want to say, somewhere about like 2007 or something. So you can find even more recent information, and that's something to keep in mind as well. So what we're doing here is we're taking a look at this, and I really think it's important to take a look at the information to understand what the search parameters are and what information you're going to get back. Because just grabbing information from websites when you don't know what the parameters of the search are, what kind of information they can provide to you, is not really that helpful. So read about it, understand what they're doing. For instance, they're telling you that this is the civil registration. This is not the parish registers, and this is not some other record. So you have the ability to conduct searches here, and you just click on the search box. And what it brings up is your search parameters. And you could ask for all types of information, and it would combine the birth, marriage, and death records. I like to look at it for one data set at a time. So I'm going to ask it for the birth records. And I'm also going to ask it for my surname. And the other thing I'm going to ask for is all districts and all counties. Now, because I did it like this, it brought up all of the records, and it tells me that it is about 99% complete. So it brought up all births for Keoghs. And if I were to scroll through here, as I said, we start out with 1807 and it takes us through to 1962 in this instance. Now the question is there nobody after 1962? Because it told me the records were current, that they had transcribed all the records through 1983. So that's something that I'm going to want to take a look at. But what we can do is go right back up to the top, and we're going to want to do that much better. I will say that when you have this much information, it's a little hard to be scrolling through it, I've noticed. And I don't know if that's the recording or if it's just this site. So in this instance, I asked for all birth information with the name Keogh. You could also limit this, and certainly you have to. If you have a very common surname, you have to limit it because it'll only give you so much information at a time. There's a limit to it. You can look up in the information section what that is. But Keogh is not that common of a surname, so we're pretty good with this one. But if it was a common surname, or if there were a lot of hits, you could limit it, pick a 100-year period, then go back and do the next 100 years, and do it in 2 or 3 sets, whatever that is. So be sure to take a look at the key, and it tells you what information you're getting. Always keeping in mind that this is an index, not the actual registration certificate. So you have your surname of Keogh, you have your given name, you have the district where the birth was registered, and you have the volume and the page number. Now you can look and find out more about the information, and basically that's going to tell you who transcribed it, maybe how many times it's been transcribed, because if something's unclear they might have another transcriber look at it. And you can also take a look at the actual scan. They have that available. If there is no question, if when I scroll through this there are no question marks, it's not looking like something's unclear, there's not a page number missing, I tend not to look for those scans because the scan is giving me exactly that information. If you want to do some quality control, you can take a look at the individual scans. Maybe it's an area that you're specifically interested in because that's where your family members come from. Maybe if Warrenton was really important to you, you'd want to take a look at that scan, or you'd want to make a copy of it. It's rather easy to do, and so I'll just show you. It tells you the entry information, and this has been transcribed by two people. So it's almost like a double blind so that you can kind of make sure that they got the correct information. And then you can view the original. Now you can view it as an original, and if you come over here, it'll show you the scan. You could save it as a PDF or a JPEG. So it gives you the ability to do that. And I'm going to bring it up just so you can see. We're going to scroll through and find where it is, and there he is right there. Keogh, James, Warrington. It's volume 20 and page 436. Now this is a good indication. This shows you this was typed at this point, but as you have older records that you look at, what you're going to find is it's handwritten, and sometimes the handwriting is not all that easy to read, and so sometimes you might have a better understanding of the handwriting than perhaps one of the transcribers. So definitely if there's a question mark or the page numbers don't seem to match up, go ahead and take a look at the scan and you'll be able to read it for yourself. And you can see there, if I'd wanted the scan, how easy that was and how quick it was to download it and save it as a JPEG. But this is not anything that I'm personally interested in, and note that the JPEG is identified here for you. So I'm going to go back to the search. Now, all of this information is in there, and you can save the search or you can download the search. Now the interesting thing here is if you download the search, it'll come up in text format. And when it brings it up in your notepad or whatever system that you use, I'm using a PC and Microsoft products, so it brings up Notepad. It tells me what my search parameters were, Keogh with the surname Keogh, and births, and it gives me all of my results. And I can take all of those results, scroll through them, just grab them all, copy and paste them, and I paste them personally into the Excel spreadsheet. So you have it in text format and you can save that, and then you copy and paste it into Excel. So that's what I've done. Now we're going to go to my Excel spreadsheet. Now the first thing that I do in an Excel spreadsheet, and I think this is really important to do in a one-name study, it's also really important to do when you are doing genealogy research and putting something into a spreadsheet, is you need to have on your first worksheet of your Excel workbook information about the project, because you want someone else, if they're going to be picking up this project and working with it, to understand what you did and how you did it. And so I always have as the cover worksheet to any one of my workbooks the date, the project, the tasks, my methodology, the status of the project, and any additional notes that I have. So in this instance, I started this on July 25th of this year, and the project was to acquire a complete listing of birth register entries for England and Wales for the Keogh surname and its variants, keeping in mind that this information is an index. So I gathered the entries, and this is how I'm going to accomplish it, the task. I'm going to gather all the entries from Free Birth Marriage Death Index for the births, and I have listed out how many entries there are, as well as the total, so that I can do a quality control and check and make sure I got all of them. And then I describe the methodology, how I'm accomplishing the task, where I'm putting the information, how I put the information together. Some projects are real simple to do. For instance, with Free Birth Marriage Death and with the free census records and the parish records that are online, you can download that information and literally put it into your spreadsheet program. In other instances, for instance the SSDI, we really had to do a lot of tidying up and moving things around before it was in a useful format. So each data set and each website that provides it is a little bit different, and so it's very helpful to always put your methodology in there. Now, I also know, because I put this type of information in there and make it red so that I notice it, I know where I left off, and I worked on it on the 25th and a little bit on the 26th of July, and then I came back to it on the 1st of September and looked up information. And I'm not going to be able to get back to it for a while, and so in this instance I can tell you that I've added the find my past information for Keo, but I haven't gotten to the other entries yet. So I do know exactly where I'm going to pick up when I start again. One other thing is I took a look at how this whole registration process came about so that I have a little bit of a background of it. I know that I have the index information. I also know now that there are parish records and that parishes are online and have some of their information and have some additional information. So in that instance, I need to make sure that I've covered every district. And so what I went ahead with that is I listed all of the counties in England as well as the counties in Wales. And the reason that I did this was I knew that I needed to find the local registration districts, and you find those by county in the parish records apparently. So I wanted to make sure that I had a breakdown there and that I also had the correct spellings, and then I can make a drop down list of this that I can use on all of my records so that I'm not constantly entering that data. I'm making the best use of Excel since it already provides that kind of a help or an assist for me. So in any event, I know all of the other areas that I have to look at before I know that all my birth records are complete, but I have an idea, basically a roadmap of where I need to go, how I need to get there, where I'm at now, and where I need to end up. So that is my instruction sheet on the front sheet of every workbook. I would really encourage you, however you do it, to do this yourself. The next thing I do, and it's just because I'm more visual than most, is I've color-coded things. Red is always stop for me, green is always go or something I can work with. The instructions are always that tan color, and then I color code some of the label information, whether it's birth, marriage, death. I also do it for census records. In this instance, since I'm using this color coding for all of these vital statistics, this is what I use for everyone. And I have the free birth, marriage, death index. I'm going to have the find my past index. I'm going to have information I find from Family Search. So whether it's on the national or the local level, whether it's some, copies that are held by American entities, any of that, it's all together. But I'm also going to know what my source was for the information so that I'm not kind of mixing it all together. Now, the thing that I wanted to show you first off, and you'll notice down here, all surnames are in red, and then all surnames at the end is in green, and it says play reel. First off, I took the information that I copied and pasted and I put it into a spreadsheet, and it is under the name of Keo with that spelling. And as you look up each one, you're going to enter it on its own sheet, whether it's your primary surname or it's your variant. And as you'll recall, the event was births. It gives you the quarter, it gives you the year, the surname, the given name, the district, the volume, and the page. You'll notice that after I entered all of that information, every single one of those entries was copied and pasted in. And if it's a short, a small surname, you can do it in one copy and paste. If it's a longer one, you might have 2 or 3 groups that you have to enter. Enter, copy and paste all of that information first, and then tidy up your entire worksheet. And the way that I tidy it up is I make a column for the mother's maiden name because the later indexes include this information. So you want to make sure you grab it and include it. And then maybe when you go back to local records, it'll be included on that, or it'll be included on the registration form, and you have a place to put it in the future. I also list the source and the date that I accessed this information. So I know, for instance, that I looked all of this up as of the 25th of July, every single entry. And you might say to yourself, well, why do you have it on each row? Well, I'll show you a little bit later, but if I'm only looking up one district, I might look up a district, say it's Bolton, and I have 50 entries, and I grab that filtered worksheet and I take it somewhere to do research on it. Well, I want to know for every single entry where I got the information from, and I wouldn't know that if I only put it on one line or one row of this worksheet, and that's why I put it on every single row. doesn't take any time to do. It's a pretty simple thing to enter, and you really do need to keep track of where you get every piece of information. Now, the other thing that I do is I always add a reference number, and I want that reference number to be there because when I start maybe making a family tree, when I have found a family and I'm putting them together and I want to reference a birth record or a death record or a marriage record, I want to be able to go back to that reference number, which is not going to change, and say that for whatever that family is and whoever that individual is, where I have that birth record and where I could link it to if I wanted to. And so this is just a good way to have them numbered. It's clean for me. People do it different ways. You might have a code in there. Somebody might want to put a B before a birth record number. However you do it, that's up to you. This is just one example of how to do it. I could always combine the event with the reference number if I wanted to, but I know that it's there to work with. So I've entered this information for Keo. I've also entered it, grabbed and pasted the information for any of these other names. And I'm just showing you how those all look. And basically what you'll see is there. And so each sheet is the same. For instance, you'll see here these names go from, these births go from 1841 to 1907. So there's no maiden name in here. But later records and later spellings that are more common are going to have that information. So once I have those individual sheets done, then I place them in a worksheet where I have them all listed. And I just copy and paste each of these names here. And if you were to go through here, let's go down to the bottom. This takes me down to my last one, and that was just hitting Control and arrow down, and it takes me to my last entry, which is 6,591 names that I entered for births. And I took all of that information from the free birth, marriage, death index. So all of that is entered. As you can see, mother's maiden names start appearing there. Now the thing is, I'm not going to touch this worksheet, and that's why this worksheet is red. I've entered all the information. I have them on the individual sheets. Those are also not getting touched. The red sheet is a clean worksheet of all of the entries together. And what I do, and you can do this as well, is you go to Move or Copy, and it gives you the option, and you create a copy and you put it at the end of your worksheet. And that's exactly what I did here. So when I did that, this is what I came up with. And this is the worksheet. And I've already sorted this worksheet, and it's not sorted in the data entry in the format that I originally got it, because that was by starting with the Keo surname and working all the way through and then going to my variants. And so all of the numbers are from 1 to the last number that we entered. What I did here was I already filtered this. I actually sorted it rather, and I put it in date order. That's what I asked for. So I asked for date order, and then I asked, I don't think I asked for anything else. So we start out in September of 1837, and so our last entry, if we go down to the bottom here, our last entry is going to be the most recent date here, which we noticed before is 1962. Okay, so that's it. That's the end of it. And you'll notice that some of these things are in date order, but not very many. So this gives you all that information. Now, since this is my play reel, and I also looked up what additional information is available on a local level and what information is available if we're looking up the FamilySearch.org records, what I found out was that some of the other records they give you the date of birth, the birthplace, they give you a sub-district. We talked about the mother's maiden name before. So that's in there, and that comes from local information. And then I wanted the sources for that. Then also, Family Search has a date of baptism, and it lists the father, mother, the residence, and their baptism source. So I wanted to continue on with my records there. And So if I can find baptismal information, I'll have the additional website and the website reference, as well as any citations and any notes that I want to make. So realize that the actual columns can go on forever. I want to keep all of the information about birth and baptism together. Because I'm able to maybe link a family here. But if all I ever have is the birth information, that's still excellent as far as finding out information. Now, one thing I will say is on a couple of these, I had already found the people and I had worked through, as you noticed, because I checked off some of the first counties, yeah, I think they were counties. So I have some additional information. And that included a mother's maiden name here. It included local reference. I'd gone to one or two of the local registered districts so I could see what their records looked like, just to kind of play with it and set it up. I haven't had the time, to go back and look at it. You saw those counties that were for England and Wales. As I slowly work through them, I'll be adding to this worksheet. But that's the point of talking about how to enter this information. Now, the reason that I consider this a play reel, and one other thing I'll tell you is I have copied this play reel and put it on its own workbook as a backup. And you can easily do that. You can copy it into another workbook. It doesn't have to be a copy that stays in the same workbook. I think we talked about that with the SSDI, but I'll show you some how to play around with Excel a little bit to make it easier to work with for people who are doing one name studies in another video. But in any event, say that I wanted to look up, say somebody contacted me and they said that they were from Bath and they wanted to, or that they were going to Bath, and that they'd be able to look up any information that I wanted in Bath about birth records, or maybe say they were from Bath or their family was from Bath with this surname and they wanted to know what records I had. I'm able to very quickly do this because I gathered the information, I threw it into Excel, I made it, I put it into a useful format for my own purposes, and it's also not online. So this is something that I have that's on my computer that I can always gain access to. If for whatever reason, a website goes down or the information is gone, I have this index. And it's also something I can work with. But if somebody contacted me and they wanted all of the Keogh information in the District of Bath, and they were going to be able to go there and look up the information, for me, maybe do some research, or maybe a marriage challenge was coming up and they said they were working on all the districts and they named them, I can quickly go through here, find the information that I need, the event, the quarter, the year, the surname, the given name, the maiden name when the records are later, the district, the volume and page number, and that person could maybe research more information for me or tell me something more about it, or I could send it, if it were in the case of a marriage challenge through the guild, into them. And so in the course of basically one day for me, keeping in mind I only had about a little less than 7,000 records, I was able to download and paste the information into an Excel spreadsheet, put it into a usable format, and now I have that workbook. I've also done it for the marriage records and for the death records, and I'm going to show you how I did that and how those workbooks look a little different. But it's a good way to get a lot of information together for your one name study. And maybe it's a year before you get back to it and try and combine families or do family research. Maybe it's 5 years, but you have a real good start for British records by just grabbing the information that's freely available on Free Birth, Marriage, and Death Index. So I hope you take advantage of the ability to do this and to have those workbooks prepared. So if somebody gets a hold of you and they're asking about English or Welsh records, maybe they're asking about Irish records. We're going to talk later about grabbing the information from the Irish census, about grabbing information from the UK censuses. We're going to talk about gathering information, hopefully even from the US censuses. I'd like to hear how you've gathered your information and put it together, and I'm going to keep doing these individual videos to show you how I've gathered the information. So I hope I've encouraged you to go out there and gather that information and add it to your one name study. Thanks for watching, and if you have any questions, you know how to get a hold of me through the Guild of One Name Studies. Thanks.